Eerily haunting true stories about remote abandoned locations rich in history. Come with us in our travels from state to state, if you dare.
Could be the last time anybody sees us alive. I don't know where she has us, but we're going to get something filled.
Hello?
Gina, there is a beehive over there. Do you see that in the hole?
Buckle up, Buttercup.
Welcome to 50 States of Madness.
Hello.
Hi,
Welcome to 50 States of Madness.
I am here and excited
Oh, wow.
for this week's episode.
Are you?
I am, because you know what? It's going to be the first I heard about it. I have to say, we're going to give Gina credit on all this episode this week because my daughter flew in from Texas and I was busy all weekend long. And so Gina did the research. I'm doing the editing this week. I'm going to be her trusty little sidekick.
Oh, wow.
Which she tells stories way better than I do anyways.
At least I sound better this week because last week I sounded terrible. If I would have had to do that whole episode last week, we probably wouldn't have recorded. I wouldn't have been able to listen to my self-talk for that long. So
Actually, you do sound a lot better.
I do. But before we start, I want to show what we got. If you guys remember, I don't know. I think it was right before we left for Texas.
3 weeks ago, yeah.
We had 3 weeks ago before we left for Texas. We had.
Oh, but it wasn't aired. That's it. So probably about
I think
3 episodes ago. 3 or 4?
Maybe.
Okay.
Anyway, we had Cain and Agonio on from No Tracers, and I bought. It's called How to Explore Abandoned Buildings, and this book is so awesome. So I really didn't know what I was buying when I bought it, but it is like a collab with Mr. Sketch. So what it is pictures like. Hold on. I need to show one. It's pictures of like actual abandoned buildings that they've taken. This is not going to do it justice. Yeah. But then it's like sketched over it. There's like, and everything's backwards.
Some kind of artwork done over it.
Yes, done over it. It's so dope. Like, oh my God, I'm struggling. Anyway. It's super cool. If you're into like abandoned buildings or just like, I even told them I'm going to use it as a coffee table book.
It's a beautiful book. It's beautifully done because first of all, Kay does amazing photography.
Yes.
And then to get Mr. Sketch
artwork
put over it.
And when you order a book.
Well, I don't know. Is it just for us or was it for everyone?
No. So it says on the website, if you order a book, it comes with the picture. But I believe that this one was probably chosen particularly for us because when they were on our episode, guys, I am struggling on how to hold this picture. We talked about the water park, the abandoned water park on the way to Vegas, and that it's missing the letter K. It's just a water par. And so Kay said, well, like, yo, like they took my letter. Like, so if anybody has the letter K out there, send it back. So
the rightful owner.
Yeah. So this is actually a picture of Kay standing in front of the water par.
That's amazing. The water par.
The water par.
Because we were all really sad because it's disappearing.
It is.
And it's slowly decaying and it's not going to be there one day because
very sad.
People are taking stuff from it and destroying it. And
it makes me very sad. So,
yeah.
So anyway,
thanks, Kay.
Today we are going to talk about, we're going to do part 3. I don't know how many parts this is going to turn into, to be honest with you, because the more I research, the more that just keeps popping up. So
well, there's a lot of victims and a lot of murderers.
Yeah. And like the area that we were in, so much. I'm glad that I did a lot of this research after we got back because if I would have done this before, like I'm really scared for Savannah.
It's very overwhelming. No, I just put her on a plane. I just came back from the airport dropping her off and I'm like, can you just stay with me, please? But then again, on the news this morning, shootout on the freeway where 2 cars are firing at each other over here in LA. And she looked at me, she's like, okay, and Houston's much worse. Why? And I said, oh, you're right.
Well,
But
it happens everywhere. We'll say that. It happens everywhere. But I think,
I'm just afraid of the I-45.
seriously.
I know, it's scary.
Oh my God. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot.
A lot of places to dump bodies.
Yeah. And so originally today I wanted to focus on two different people, but we're only going to focus on one because it's a lot. So today we're going to talk about 5 victims, and we are going to talk about a man named William Reece. And this is, I noticed with a lot of these too, that as, you know, DNA and all this stuff has gotten better over the years, that now they're finding and able to piece together so many of these things. So a lot of this stuff is happening like right now in real time.
I think we talked about that before, about the DNA, and about one time. Eventually, it's going to be like where they show up on a crime scene. They just scan the DNA right there, and
or they're going to think about it in their
up.
Google glasses. You know, it's going to be like, oh yeah, he lives over there. Yeah,
Inspector Gadget.
Where is he at? Where is he at?
It's crazy.
These all of these murders that took place happened in the 90s, the late 90s, that we're going to talk about today. So, and these are all connected to William Reece, and he's a real piece of shit.
Is he really?
He's a real piece of shit.
All these serial killers are real pieces of shit, but he's like exceptionally.
This guy, yeah, I mean, I think after watching so many, just deep diving on all this stuff, and you just consistently watch videos of him and interviews with him, and just how entitled, and just how he's just like,
he's an asshole,
shit. Like, you know. But anyway, we're gonna talk about him today, and we're gonna talk about these girls. And so this one, again, like last week, it's pretty graphic. I feel like as the weeks go on that we're talking about these, it gets a little more graphic and a little more graphic, but I just want to put that out there. So we're going to start off in April of 1997, and we're going to talk about a 12-year-old girl named Laura Smither.
She's young.
Yeah. And Laura was a ballerina, and it sounds like she was very into, you know, sports, and just, she liked to stay active. So she went out for a run, for a jog around her hometown in Friendswood, Texas. And again, most of this all happened along the I-45. This all takes place along Interstate 45. And so she went out for a run, and she never returned.
My daughter went on a run this morning, and she's been gone a lot longer than I expected.
And what's your name, please, sir?
Bob Smither.
We were homeschooling at the time, and so I started making breakfast, and Laura asked to go for a run. That was highly unusual, because Laura did not like running, but she had been inspired to do cardio for her ballet. Ballet was her great love. And so she asked to go running, and it never occurred to me that it would be dangerous.
And at first when I read it, I was like,
scary.
a 12-year-old going out for a run? Like, okay, I did shit like that too. Like, I mean, what's the difference between going for a jog and riding your bike, or roller skating?
Yeah.
Like, I did the same thing, you know?
I'd jump on a bus and take the bus down to the beach, because we live like 3 miles from Manhattan Beach, and we down Rosecrans, and just hop on the bus. And you'd go there and you'd spend the day. I was like 6th, 7th grade. You hop back on the bus and you'd come back. You'd latchkey kids.
Yeah, it's times were definitely different then.
Absolutely.
So in the following weeks, volunteers searched the swamps and the surrounding areas for Laura. And Laura's parents, their names were Gay. Her mom's name was Gay. Her dad's name was Bob. Along with her 9-year-old brother, they devoted the next few weeks searching for Laura. Her parents, especially her mom, has put her life into not only Laura and her case, but all of these other girls that we're going to talk about. And she now speaks to law enforcement about helping them find missing girls for missing children. So
Not in a position that you'd ever want to be in, but
absolutely not.
you know,
Absolutely
she's
not.
doing okay.
She's doing the Lord's work out there
Yeah.
for sure. So 17 days later, Laura's decomposing body was found in a retention pond 12 miles from her house by a father and a son out walking their dogs. And this father and this son were interviewed, and they said, you know, how did you know? Like, what were you looking for? And the father said to the son, oh, I think it's just an animal. And the son said, animals don't wear socks.
Ooh.
And so that's when they realized that, you know, this was a human body that they had just come across. So
How old was the son? Do you know?
he looked to be maybe around 15 or 16.
That's traumatizing.
It is
For anybody,
for
for an
anybody,
adult,
but
too,
yeah. So, because her body was in the water for so long, they weren't able to determine her cause of death. And again, we said like around Texas, there's so much water. Like it's just, there's water everywhere.
Yeah.
So, on the third day that Laura was missing, detectives already had a man on their radar. So before her body was even found, they were starting to like connect the dots, I think. This man had been released from prison only 6 months before Laura was kidnapped. He had spent 10 years in prison for rape in Oklahoma, for raping 2 girls in Oklahoma.
And he'd only been out for 6 months?
He'd only been out for 6 months at the time that Laura went missing.
Wow. Okay.
So, and this was William Reece. And so he was, you know, kind of on their radar. They weren't, you know, 100%, yeah, it's him, but they were just kind of keeping an eye on him and his travels. And
He was living in the area?
yes.
Or staying in the area?
Yes. So, he was working as a bulldozer operator in Friendswood, which is right where Laura lived. And on the day of Laura's disappearance, he was released from work early that day because of rain. And so obviously when you're in construction, you don't work when it rains. So he was off work at like 9:00 in the morning. And that's around the time that she went missing. So because of this, they searched his truck. They called him and they searched his truck. And I'm sure, I didn't read, but I believe he was probably on parole at this time. So he probably had to do check-ins with them and had, you know, somebody in charge of him and his whereabouts. So at this time, when they searched his truck, they found trace fibers from his floor mats that were consistent with fibers found on Laura's socks. So, but during this time, he was out, you know, out and about, free. And he was traveling back and forth between Houston and it's called Anadarko, Oklahoma. And that's where his mom lived. So I looked it up, and it's a little over 7 hours in a car. But I don't think he was making that drive every day. But I think that he went back and forth between the two. So on July 15th, 1997, only a couple months later, a girl by the name of Kelli Cox disappears. And she disappears from Denton, Texas, which is, again, in that same area. It's along Interstate 45, and she was 20 years old, and she was on a field trip with her college, which, ironically enough, they were at the Denton Police Department. That's where her field trip was. And she locked her keys in the car. And so she had walked to, which is, here we go again with the payphone, but she had walked to a gas station to use a payphone to call somebody to come get her because she had locked her keys in the car. So again,
and her key was parked at the Denton police station?
Her car.
Her car, yeah. Her car was parked. Did I say her keys? Well, her keys were parked.
Yes.
But her car was parked at the police station when she went to go make a phone
that's
call.
That's where her her field trip was.
Balls to have to.
Well, I'm sure, you know, nobody knew that that's where her car was, because he's just, you know, she's at the gas station payphone.
And it sounds like his thing is just it's not a crime that's planned. It's like just opportunity. That's what a crime of opportunity. Like, he got off work. It wasn't that he was stalking.
I think it might have been a little of both, because they say that this payphone that she was using, it was in a really highly traveled area. It wasn't like a desolate area. There was a lot of traffic, a lot of people, a lot of things going on. So I don't know, honestly.
Because with that one, I mean, she came into Denton for a field trip, and so I'm wondering if he just kind of see her, or maybe he pulled over, asked her, "Hey, you need help?" Or, I don't know. Who knows, right?
Yeah. Okay. So, and as we get into it, he talks about each one of these.
Oh,
he talks
we'll
about
probably
each
know
one
more
of
about
these.
this one than the last few.
So Kelli was a mom. She was only 19 years old when she had her little girl named Alexis, and her little girl was only 1 at the time. And that is what kind of tipped her family off, is that she didn't pick her daughter up from daycare that day. So her mom, Jan, and her family also talked to all the local news stations, printed flyers. They were all determined that they were, going to find her. And so they were just pleading with everybody, and to watch these videos of these families like plead with people, like, please bring her home. And they're just so, they're so set on, like, they're not gone, they're not dead, nothing's happened, like, they're gonna come home. It's so sad.
They used to have to beg to babysit me. She would take me everywhere. They could not get me out of her arms.
She had Alexis very young, but she was very focused, knew she wanted to get her degree. That's why she was in summer school. She had a time frame set. She wanted to graduate in May of '98 and then start working on her master's, because she was majoring in psychology with a minor in criminal justice.
She would have graduated with honors. There was no doubt.
But eventually, with no leads, Kelli's case went cold, and never a body found or anything. So, only 11 days after Kelli went missing, another young woman goes missing, but this time in Oklahoma, which is
busy.
Yeah. So, which is not far from where William Reese's mom lives, in Anadarko. So, she was newly married. She was 19 years old. Her name was Tiffany Johnston. She went missing from a car wash in Bethany, Oklahoma. And this was on July 26, 1997. So they found her car was there in the car wash. Her mats were hanging up on the side. It was like one of those car washes where you wash it yourself. Her mats were left hanging, keys in the car, wallet, money, everything in the car. But she was gone. So the next day, Tiffany's body was found partially clothed in a tall grassy area off of the interstate, only 15 miles from the car wash. And she had been strangled and sexually assaulted. She had rope burns on her wrists, and her face was completely bruised. Like, her eyes were black and blue. So a few days after Tiffany's murder, this is where it gets a little twisted. So a couple days after, her mom gets a phone call. Tiffany's mom gets a phone call, and it's from William Reece, and he's calling to give his condolences. I'm sorry, I heard about your daughter. It's such a shame. And her mom was like, oh my God, thank you so much.
Oh,
like,
who
well,
are you?
it turns out that she knew him, because her mom used to work at a restaurant, and I guess William Reese's mom used to come into that restaurant all the time. And so she knew, not knew them. They were acquaintances, we'll say.
Yeah.
And back in 1996, when Reese was originally released from prison for the 10 years after raping the 2 girls in Oklahoma, obviously went back to mommy's house,
Yeah.
And his mom asked Tiffany's mom if she could give him a ride to the DMV to get his driver's license. So her mom back in 1996, a year prior to this, was giving this guy a ride to get his driver's license.
To drive the same vehicles that he's driving
Yeah.
around,
Yes.
abducting these girls,
Yes.
and later would
Yes.
abduct her own daughter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So,
What a sick fuck.
yeah, it's,
I'm like, I just got chills.
yeah.
Like,
And at the time, you know, her name was Kathy. Tiffany's mom's name was Kathy. And she says that, you know, at the time we knew that he had just got out of prison, but we didn't know for what. And his mom just made it sound like it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't, you know, and she's like, I didn't ask,
yeah.
you know, I never thought to ask. I was just trying to help. So
I think sometimes people try to be too polite and not get into other people's business. But sometimes if you hear something like that,
I don't try to be polite.
Yeah.
But you know me, I don't ask questions.
You don't
I
get into people's business.
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't ask questions.
And I think sometimes, you know.
And in this case, yeah, it could definitely come back to bite you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so the investigators were able to collect DNA from Tiffany's body, but they were unable to develop a DNA profile. So 3 weeks after Tiffany's murder, 17-year-old high school senior went missing from Lamarck, Texas. Jessica Cain was last seen leaving a restaurant called Bennigan's on August 17th, 1997. When Jessica didn't show up at her curfew time, her dad went looking for her. After checking all the places that he thought she might be, he spotted her car off of none other than Interstate 45, 3 miles from where they lived. So her dad's out looking for her, driving around town looking for her, and on his way back home, he spots her car.
What town was this?
This was in Lamarck.
Lamarck. Okay.
And I believe it's all like, I don't know if we visited Lamarck.
I don't think so.
But looking at a map, it's all right there.
Yeah, it's all up.
They're
and down
just
that
all
I-45.
little
suburbs outside of Houston.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, so Jessica, they couldn't find her. And at this time they had over 100 volunteers and they were searching the whole areas. They had tracking dogs. They had everything. Again, these people were like determined, you know, to find her. And there was no sign. And also they mentioned that at this time, Laura Smither, the 12-year-old that I first talked about, the first victim, her family even got involved and they were helping in the search for Jessica Cain.
At this point, did they think that maybe these were all connected? At this point,
no.
Okay.
They didn't think that they were connected, but shortly after that, after this next story, it kind of all connects, because during this time a story was brought to light about a victim that survived, and her name was Sandra Sapaugh, and this girl is a survivor of, along with the other 2 rape victims in Oklahoma. But she, back in May of 97, these literally are like back to back to back.
Yeah, it sounds like it's all in 97.
Yeah, they are. So in May of 97, 3 months before Jessica Cain went missing, Sandra stopped at a convenience store in Webster, Texas, which is again right there. She noticed a man staring at her from the parking lot. And so she drove across the street to a Waffle House and he followed her. And so he came to her car and he said, you know, do you need help? And she's like, help with what? And he said, oh, your tire's flat. Well, he had slashed her tire. And she would like, you know, and then seconds later, he had her at knife point, threw her in his truck and took off. So he raped her in the van. And he was just yelling and screaming at her. And she thought at that time, I have to get out of here. And she said that she thought to herself, even if I die, I have to jump out of this car and kill myself because I won't let him do to me what he's going to do.
Yeah.
And so she did. So she jumped out of his truck on Interstate 45 and she landed. She said as soon as she hit the pavement, she started to run for help. And she got help. She sustained like very severe injuries. She was, there's some pictures of her out there, and she's.
Did he keep going? He didn't try to stop? Okay.
No, she's extremely banged up, and it's really sad to see her like that, but she actually comes into play a lot, and it's very, very cool how all of these victims' families come together to help each other. Unfortunately, the other 4 did not survive, but
what a difference when they're allowed to talk to each other, because I know that we visited a couple episodes ago with our first 4 victims, where
with
the families,
Laura Miller and Heidi Fye, they weren't
allowed to speak with each other. The families, well, the investigators discouraged it.
Mm-hmm.
So now,
and I feel like Laura Miller's body would have been, found, or they would have known the spot, to look, because they were found feet from each other.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, what a difference. And how fast moving.
And who knows, there's probably a reason behind it, but what the reason is, I don't know.
Yeah.
So 5 months later, in October of 97, Webster investigators were meeting with Friendswood police, and they noticed that the description that Sandra gave of her abductor's truck actually matched the truck that Friendswood Police Department searched for in the Laura Smither case. So now I think they're starting to maybe connect the dots there with William Reece. Yeah. So on October 16th, the police brought him in for a lineup, and Sandra Sapaugh, the one that jumped out of his truck, she immediately identified him. I think she had a lot of trauma, and she had a hard time remembering some things. I know she went through a lot of therapy, and in time was able to remember, with help, some things. So she immediately identified him, and he was immediately arrested. He was, he pled guilty. He said that he didn't do it. He was very defiant, and I don't think he worked real well with detectives at that time. But the detectives were very determined to connect him to the Laura Smither case because of the truck,
And the socks and the fibers.
Yes.
The fibers of the,
right. Yeah. So when they searched his apartment, they found a horse blanket that he had. And there were also fibers from that blanket that were on Laura Smither's socks. But the DA at that time felt that it wasn't enough evidence to charge him with Laura's murder. So, and to hear her family, the disappointment after, them finding all that, but still thinking that it just wasn't enough evidence to charge him, I'm sure was probably just so, you just feel defeated. So the Friendswood detectives were not giving up. They started to pull records and trace exactly where Reese was the previous summer. So they started to think that maybe he was connected to all these other cases also. So I think now is when they started to think like, okay, there's a connection to all of this. So they found a receipt for gas from July 15th in Denton, Texas, which was the same day and the same place of where Kelli Cox disappeared. She's the one that had the little baby. So now he was really on the radar of the Denton police, and they tried to match Kelly's fingerprints against anything that they could find in Reese's truck, but they weren't successful. Detectives also found phone records that Reese had used a payphone in Yukon, Oklahoma, which is where Tiffany Johnston's body was found only an hour after she disappeared. So that places him right there in that area too. At the same date and the same time, obviously. The owner of the car wash that she disappeared from, that Tiffany disappeared from, the owner was shown a picture of Reese, and he said that he was a frequent customer there. So he had even been seen frequenting that car wash. So he quickly started to become a suspect in all of these girls' murders. And at one point, the investigators used bulldozers to search for Jessica Cain's body at the horse ranch that he worked at. But they were unable to find anything. So in April of 98, a year later, after all of this started, Reese went on trial for the kidnapping of Sandra Sapaugh. And Laura Smithers' mother, she went to the trial because she's so supportive, I think, of just everything and wanted to be a part of everything. And so she was there at the trial to support Sandra.
And they knew the connection.
Of course. Yeah. And she said that she had to be there for Laura. She said that she was so angry about what she had learned at the trial because I think the two girls from Oklahoma that he had previously served the 10 years for, they were there and testified. And so I think when Laura's mother heard all of this testimony, she could only imagine what he did to her daughter. And so she's like, I had to be there for Laura. Okay. It didn't take the jury long to come to a decision, and William Reece was sentenced to 60 years in prison. So, and that
was just for the one that he was being tried for. That was
just for Sandra Sapaugh. He was convicted of aggravated kidnapping. So, Laura Smithers' case remained unsolved, and her parents were not going to give up until Reese was charged. In Oklahoma, Tiffany Johnston's mom, Kathy, was not giving up either. She called every single week, and I can't even imagine, but she was just like, this, you're not going to put this on the back burner. And she said that she called every single week. Like, she's like, I'm not going to give up until something, like, I need an update. This was in the late 90s. So in 2012, so all these years later, the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation started working on cold cases, and Tiffany's case was assigned to a detective. There was DNA that was found on her body, but it had already been tested twice unsuccessfully. So a woman by the name of Wendy Duke was the supervising criminologist for the cold case unit, and she actually found 2 DNA samples that had not been used, that there was still enough to be tested. And so they were able to develop a partial male profile, DNA profile from these samples. But because it was only a partial profile, they could only compare it to that of a known person. So you had to have like a sample from another person. So they had obviously these people that they were testing. And so when they began to like eliminate people, they got to William Reece and they were unable to eliminate him. So,
and could they get a sample from him? Like you said, they needed a sample from.
Well, that's what they were using was his sample. Yeah,
and they couldn't eliminate him.
They could not eliminate him. So,
and did they say like what were the chances or the odds of him not being eliminated? Like,
no, they didn't. I think it was pretty. I think when you have like an actual sample,
yeah,
I think it's pretty. It's
I'm going to say
in the millions or trillions, probably. I would guess. So the DA in Oklahoma thought that it was enough to charge him with the murder of Tiffany Johnston. So Oklahoma investigators shared with the Texas law enforcement, and they asked if they thought Reese would be willing to talk about the other girls that they thought he was connected to. So they were asking, like, you know, do you think if we bring him over here that he'll talk, or if we go to him? So they went to visit him, and they were shocked when he agreed to discuss things further, but only if they would take the death penalty off the table. And so
I am always shocked at these guys. Like, they kill people, but yet, oh my God, don't kill me. I'm too scared to die. Like, seriously, dude, like, you're fucking killing people. Like, you should get the same shit.
Yeah.
Like,
don't do it to me.
I'm like, and they're all chicken shit. Like, oh my God, no.
Yeah, when it comes down to it.
Oh, talk if you take that off the table. Like, fuck, you just finished killing people. Like,
yeah, you weren't scared then, were you?
Thank you. Like, it's just so frustrating.
Yeah. So, so he said that he would talk, but, you know, obviously they had to take the death penalty off the case. So Laura Smithers' parents, as well as Kelli Cox's parents, they agreed. They were like, that's fine. You know, go ahead and talk. We'll take it off the table. No death penalty. So, I'm
just curious, like, can they say that to somebody and then still go after the death penalty?
I don't think so.
Maybe because of the
I don't think so.
song. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think at this point,
they have to sign something.
The parents just wanted answers.
Yeah.
You
wanted to know what happened to their babies.
Yeah. So, and Kelli Cox, like, you know, her body wasn't found. And so Jessica Cain and Kelli Cox, their bodies weren't found. And so they
just wanted to know what happened.
You know, the parents still had this hope, like, is she going to come knocking at the door? You know, like you never lose that hope.
Or you just want to have, you want to find the body.
You just need closure of some kind to know what happened.
So they can rest in peace.
Yeah. So in February of 2016, now we're in 2016, and this takes forever. Like this stuff just takes a really long time. The court process takes a long time. But Reese was moved from prison to the Friendswood jail to give investigators information on the 3 cases. Reese took investigators out to a field south of Friendswood where he said Kelli Cox's remains were. However, he hadn't said that he was responsible for her death. He was just saying, like, this is where her body is. You'll be able to find her body here. So investigators spent many days with Reese out in the field and in jail questioning him. He finally started to tell investigators about his time with Kelli Cox. So this is what he says happened. He claims that he got into a fight at the gas station with her after she bumped into him and she spilled her Coke on him. Apparently she was like filling up like a big gulp or whatever. He bumped into her and she spilled her soda on him.
Anyway, there's a little white building, grocery store. Like, I pulled up on the side of it, opened up the door, and I kind of got out too fast, or I fell out, or almost fell out, or so. Anyway, I run into this girl. Coke went all over me and her. And I started cussing her. I think I pushed her. That's when she hit me with the Coke, plastic Coke thing. And I slapped her. And then it was over.
She was fighting back?
Yes.
Okay. What happens next?
And then I grabbed her around the throat. And I choked.
So, yeah.
It sounds like he ran into her on purpose, I'm just saying.
He said that it escalated and that he choked her and killed her. After confessing to murdering Kelli, the investigators weren't sure he was telling the truth after not being able to find her body in that field. So they were unable to find her body.
Did he say how he got her out of the gas station?
No.
Okay.
No. He just said that it escalated and he choked her.
Okay.
I mean, you don't just choke her at the Big Gulp station.
That's what I'm thinking. Like, that's what it
the local
sounds like.
Arco. Like I don't
she
know.
threw thing at me and I just turned around and started choking her right
I
there.
think at this point they're just
soda fountain.
trying to talk to him and get any information that they can from him. So he then started telling police what happened to Laura Smither. And this is where it gets a little graphic. So
just a little warning.
Yeah, a little warning, because remember, Laura Smither was 12 years old when this happened. So he said that he was driving down the road and he heard a thump and he hit her with his car accidentally, and that she fell into a ditch, and when he got out of his car he looked down and she was dead already. But then after the fact, he changes his story and he said that he hit her but she didn't die, and that when he went to where her body landed, that she was crying for help and he was trying to stop her from crying and he accidentally broke her neck.
Do we believe him?
Yeah. It's just, I can't imagine as a parent having to listen to something like that, knowing that your child was crying. Like, yeah. I mean, it's almost better to just know that she went quickly.
I was hoping for the first story, like where he hit her, she died.
Yeah.
My whole thing though,
if it was an accident,
he didn't do it on an accident.
He did not do it on an accident.
Not with his
history. Accident. And at this point, you've already, you've really dug yourself into a hole. Like, why are you trying to make this sound like an accident? After all these things you're going to admit to, you're going to make one sound like an oopsie. Like, I don't know.
And he already placed himself at the place. So it's like,
But this just goes to show you the like how their minds process so differently, so differently. So once Reese started talking, he just kept going. Like he just continued to talk and talk. So they think that he was enjoying all of this attention that it was bringing him because, in jail, he's not getting any attention at all. And so now all of a sudden he's got the spotlight on him and he's got all these answers to all these questions everybody wants. So now he's just like, he's not going to stop talking. Now he's just going to keep going. So after a week of searching for Kelli Cox, Reese agreed to help investigators find another body, and that is the body of Jessica Cain. So he's claiming he knows where her body is too. So he claimed that he buried her in a different field closer to Friendswood. He claims that he had an argument outside of the restaurant that Jessica was last seen at, and that she followed him down the I-45 for 30 miles. She followed him. He said that they pulled over and she was still yelling at him. He said that he choked her out right there on the side of the road, although he admitted to murdering Kelli, Jessica, and Laura. He said that he did not rape any of them. Even though he raped Sandra Sapaugh, which is the one that survived, and then the 2 girls from Oklahoma. But he's saying that these girls he didn't. So, which at this point, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I mean, you've done enough at this point. He then starts telling investigators about Tiffany Johnston. And he said that he was at the car wash washing his truck, and that he heard her yell because he apparently was washing the underneath part of his truck and he sprayed her. And so she yelled, like with those water things, the, high pressure things.
Those hoses.
I'd probably yell if somebody sprayed me too.
Well, so I don't know. I'm going to second guess yelling at anybody now.
Maybe not. I won't. No, I won't. But he said that they started to argue, and he forced her into his horse trailer, and he unsnapped her overalls, and then Tiffany turned around and hit him in the head with a horseshoe that she found in there. And
good for her.
At that time, he got very, very upset. Really? You just force somebody into your horse trailer, and you're upset?
It was self-defense.
I'm sorry. Wow.
It's crazy. Like you said, how their mind thinks.
Yeah. So then he said he just started squeezing her around her throat. And then he grabbed a lead rope, which I'm assuming is something for a horse. And I'm assuming just choked her to death. So many detectives thought that because Kelli Cox and Jessica Cain's body hadn't been found, that maybe he wasn't being truthful. Maybe he was just making this up
for the attention.
He liked the attention. After 25 days of digging in March of 2016, and at this time, because they had been digging at this point for weeks and weeks, and they had found nothing, they started out with like a pretty big crew of people helping, and at this point, it's just down to a few people, because at this time they're just like, we're not finding anything. This guy's just, he's just making up stories at this point. But after 25 days of digging in March 2016, with Reese's help, they found Jessica Cain's body. And then 2 weeks later, they found Kelli Cox's body. So
in the area.
Yeah, they recovered both bodies. I think he probably forgot where he buried them.
Probably not the exact location yet.
Yeah, because again, these fields are never ending. They look the same everywhere you go. They're so similar. Like, you could be standing 2 miles apart and it looks the same.
If they closed our eyes and they dropped us off, would not have any clue as to what field we were at.
Never. Yeah. It's just, it's very, very similar, all the areas. So after the 2 girls' bodies were found, Oklahoma prosecutors had Reese transferred back to their state to face a capital murder charge. And that was for Tiffany Johnston. Sorry, it's Johnston, not Johnson. Reese pled not guilty, even though investigators had his confession and his DNA. In May 2021, his trial started, and his people fought to keep his taped confession out of it. They did not want the jury to see his confession. And I think during this time, a lot had been delayed because of COVID.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
So from 2016, and then, that takes a little time to process. Once it processed, I think we went into COVID, and then, everything was kind of
shut down,
backed up. But the judge decided that the jurors would absolutely 100% see all of it. So Sandra Sapaugh and the 2 girls that he raped in the 1980s testified at Tiffany Johnston's trial.
I feel bad for these victims, the ones that survived. And I'm just going to say, because, I mean, good for them that they're going to all these trials for them, but they're having to relive that over and over in front of the jury. And to put them away for good, I guess that's a peace of mind, and it's something that I would do too. But I just
still
feel bad because usually it's you do your trial and you're done.
Mm-hmm.
But because he committed all these other
and these girls are just like having to relive this over and over and over. Imagine.
And to be questioned again by a defense attorney. Like, they're brutal.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
It's
yeah.
like,
They
just,
100% are.
Yeah. And
the way that they question, they're so accusatory and like, you know, basically it's just like, you're making this up.
Yeah.
You're lying.
But good for them for doing it.
Absolutely.
I just give them a lot of credit for having to go through that over
everything.
and over again.
Oh, yeah. 100%. Because I feel like a lot of people wouldn't do that. But like I said in the beginning, like, I feel like all of these victims and the families, the surviving victims and then the non-survivor families have all stuck together through all of this and really tried to, like, you know,
support each
other through all of this, you know. And of course, I'm sure they're all receiving, you know, they're probably all in therapy and probably will be for the rest of their life, hopefully, and just getting help to go on with their life because they're so young. They have so much life to live. So only after 9 days of hearing testimony, it took the jury only 2 hours to come to a verdict, finding Reese guilty of murdering Tiffany Johnston, and he was sentenced to death. And that was the one from Oklahoma.
So the death penalty wasn't taken off the table?
But that was not, this was for Tiffany Johnston.
Oh, okay.
This was for the girl from Oklahoma.
So that wasn't on the...
Right. Yeah. This was the ones that agreed to take the death penalty off was Kelli Cox and Laura Smither, which were from Texas. So he was sentenced to death.
Saying in the law, justice delayed is justice denied. Justice will not be delayed any longer in this case. I sentence you to death.
Before being sent to death row, Reese was taken to Texas and pled guilty of the murders of Laura Smither, Kelli Cox, and Jessica Cain. So he ended up pleading guilty to all that.
Mr. Reese to the allegation in cause number 16 CR 2334, first degree felony murder of Laura Smither. How do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
In cause number 16 CR 2335, to the first degree felony charge of murder of Jessica Cain. How do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty, Your Honor.
After 25 years, these families finally, like, it was 25 years before they actually got justice, you know? Like,
yeah,
that's so long. And we've seen that
over and over again.
Over and over again, you know?
But that's why I'm so glad that technology is catching up with
because hopefully
DNA and all that.
We will start to see a lot of this, you know, to happen.
Yeah, I feel like crimes that happen today, even though, like, we did give the statistics a couple episodes ago regarding, you know, how many unsolved cases are out there and stuff, but I think a lot of them is ones that happen, you know, prior to,
of course,
this DNA advancement. So
yeah. So hopefully we'll see more and more of this as time goes on. So instead of the death penalty, Reese got 3 consecutive life sentences.
Oh, so they didn't give him the death?
Well, no, not in the 3 that I just said. He was given the death penalty in Oklahoma.
Awesome. So
for Tiffany Johnston, but for all of that, he for these 3, because they said that it was taken off the table, he got 3 consecutive life sentences.
When are we flipping the switch? That's all I want to know. Like,
right. And Laura Smither, her mom, we've spoke about her quite a bit in this episode, Gay. She spoke at the hearing, and she said that she told him a bunch of things, and one of the things that she said to him was, we will always have an empty spot at our dinner table thanks to you. That's true. But she also said that she forgave him And we've seen that again in another one of our very, very early on episodes that we did.
I think they do it more for themselves.
And she did. And that's what she said, is that forgiveness doesn't mean that I condone what he did. It doesn't mean I'll ever forget what he did. She said the forgiveness was for me, not to live in a cage of rage for the rest of my life.
Forgiveness was really for me, to let myself out of I was in such a prison of anger and rage.
And, you know, I think to go on to what she's doing now when she's working with, you know, missing person cases and all of this, she can't be in that mindset constantly. She can't be so rageful and vengeful against all of these people and be able to be composed and do what she has to do. So so that's how she's kind of carrying on her daughter's, you know, legacy like that. And then Kelli Cox's family, they have a statue on the campus of UNT, which is where Kelli was going to school. And it's so pretty. It's a statue that sits right on campus, and it's got like a little saying on it, and we can post a picture of it, but it's to help remind people to always be aware of their surroundings. And it's really, really pretty. So as we speak right now, William Reece is still in a Texas prison. Oklahoma authorities are in the process of trying to get him to face his sentence there, which is the death sentence. But I know California flip-flops all the time about, you know, all of this. I'm not sure how other states do it, but
I have faith in Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma just, you know, you're sentenced to death, you're going to follow through on it.
Yeah. I mean,
really
we can, yeah. And at this point, he ain't going anywhere.
Yeah.
He's not going anywhere.
Yeah, but for him to even breathe.
Yeah, it's I mean, you know, a lot of people have so many different, they look at the death sentence in so many different ways. I mean, two wrongs don't make a right, but
I have a hard time when there's a lot of questionable, like when when you're kind of like, circumstantial evidence, or where I don't have DNA, or where I do. It's really hard for me to say,
put someone to death
on that. But when it comes to somebody who's
when
flat
it's
out
a clean
admitted,
cut case like this,
DNA's there, everything's supporting it. It's like
I look at it so many different ways too, because I'm like, you know what? Let him sit in there and suffer.
That is true.
Let him sit in there and suffer for what he did. Like, don't let him go. Don't just take him out and give him the easy way out. Let him suffer in there. But then I think, like, I don't know, is he living better than we are? He gets 3 meals a day. They have access to the internet now. They all have cell phones. You know, they get to work out.
I guess it's, how is he living in there?
So I mean, I guess it depends. Yeah, it would depend.
How are they living?
Yeah. What does his day-to-day life look like?
Yeah. If he's just sitting in a cell and
he can sit there and
only gets 15 minutes of sunshine a day, okay, I'm good.
Yeah.
But if he's mingling with the population and he's able, a lot of them get to go to school.
I want to know too, is he with the general population?
Yeah, that's
because
what I
people like this don't make it very many years in prison for committing the crimes that he's done. Crimes against children don't do well.
In prison.
Yeah.
So,
I
wanted to
So I don't know. Is he with general population? Like, throw him in with general population. If that's the case, throw him in there. Let him see how he can defend himself against other men.
Well, because a lot of times they get free education too.
That's what I'm saying.
Over here, my daughter's got $100,000 in student loans.
Yeah,
and it's ridiculous for their education. And over here, they walk out with a master's degree. You know, and it's like kind of.
Well, he ain't ever walking out.
No, I know he's not. But even to even have the opportunity to earn one.
Well, and my thing is, they have access to computers. They're here emailing people.
Yeah.
They have little pen pals or whatever the hell the case may be. And like, I'm sorry, like, don't come at me. Like, people who have, I have many friends who have done time. So I get that.
There's a different way, but that's what I'm saying.
For
the levels.
this kind of crime that has been proven time and time again and over, like, you are guilty of this. Like, you deserve to do nothing but sit in a cell and rot for the rest of your life. Like, you should not have access to anything but bread and water, maybe.
That's what I think. Yeah,
maybe
there should be different levels. Levels. I get being able. Yeah, it's different levels, different crimes, different. The crime should fit the punishment. The punishment should fit the crime. There we go.
Yeah. So that is William Reece. So he's, like I said, a real piece of shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a real piece of shit. So
not walking away feeling good talking about that one.
No, definitely not. That was a hard one to get through. But so next week, I don't know. We're gonna have to go through and see. There are, like I said, there are some people who are, and he was considered a serial killer. And there are some that are connected to numerous girls. And then there's just kind of, maybe next week we'll talk about the ones that are just here and there. And there's so many that haven't been.
Or maybe just about the girls.
Bodies haven't been found, and some that are just connected to different people. So, because that, has literally just served as a dumping ground for people, unfortunately. So. All right. Well, that is our episode for today, and we will definitely be back next week with something from Texas. Yeah. So, thank you to our Patreons. I believe by now, by the time this airs, you guys should all have your T-shirts, and hope you like them. And if you'd like to support us on Patreon, we're at 50 States of Madness, as well as on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, 50 States of Madness. And we're on all podcast platforms.
Awesome.
Yeah. So we will see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.